Curios shop behind the curtain.
Shall we have a cup of tea and talk about it?
I stood with my elbows on the counter and my chin in my hands, looking out through the shop window as the daylight faded and the stars began to appear. On the bricks of the building opposite, a vast maple vine had climbed from the street nearly to the second floor, and its leaves were a bright ruby red that glowed under the street lamp. I think I should put the kettle on, I said aloud, and heard a soft, agreeing meow from the back room behind the curtain. We were alone in the shop after a busy day. It was that time of year, but I hadn't closed up yet, and I had a feeling I knew why. Someone was coming. It was about to be someone's first visit to my shop. I'd seen the sign for the shop someday over the summer when I'd been out pedaling my bike. The sign was small and wooden, hanging from an iron brace over a door I'd never noticed. And even then, I'd forgotten it as soon as I looked away. Then, a week later, I'd seen it again, and it sparked a memory, and I'd retained a bit more of it. I turned and parted the black curtain that hung behind the counter and stepped into my workshop. I had an old, scrubbed pine table where I mixed herb preparations and tea. Beside the table, there was a stove with a large copper kettle sat on top, already full of water and just waiting to be warmed. I rubbed my hands together in front of me, building a bit of heat between my palms, and then turned on the gas and snapped my fingers close to the burner. I smiled to myself and adjusted the burner. I'd come a long way since that day, a few Octobers past, and been handed a package wrapped in paper. I'd seen the sign swinging a bit in the rising wind, and this time I'd been able to read it. Painted in fading maroon letters on a dark green background was the word Curios. I must have been mesmerized for a few moments lost in thinking about the moon. How distant and remote. Yet, she was present and known to each person in the world.
Most people in our little village had no idea I was here, working quietly in the background, and that was just how I liked it. I stood beside the stove as the kettle got closer to singing, and added a touch more water to the simmer pot beside it. There was a prickle at the back of my neck, and I turned and peeked through the curtain into our shop. Out on the sidewalk, a woman stood, seemingly in a trance. The full moon was reflected in her glasses, and I recognized her face. She'd come close to finding us before, but had never quite made it to the door.
I came back to myself as someone brushed past me.
Look this way.
In a hurry to cross the street.
Oh, thank you.
They spun me around a bit, and that's when my eyes fell upon the sign.
I watched her taking in the sign.
Curios, I said to myself. It was an odd sensation, but it seemed like the lines of the door under the sign, of the front window, and its contents,
freshly stocked with candles,
were coming into existence.
Herbs.
As I looked at them, I'm sure because there was just so much to take in, and things that so many details to observe. Must be runes. The door was solid wood, painted black, but with small carvings all over it, sigils and motifs of moons and acorns and honeybees that had been meticulously shaped in the panels, inscrutable to me, but pretty nonetheless. I reached for the doorknob, thinking I'd likely find it locked. But it turned smoothly in my hand.
We heard the door open and close,
and I pulled the door open and stepped through.
And I slipped out from behind the curtain to welcome our guest.
It was dim inside, and my glasses immediately fogged up on my face. It had been chilly out on the sidewalk, and the air in here was warm and smelled of rose petals and lavender and sandalwood. There were creaky wood floors under my boots, and the sound of a simmering pot somewhere in the background. I started to unwind the scarf from around my neck in the warmth.
I'll just hang this up for you.
And a hand reached out to take it.
So glad you finally made it in.
I turned toward the voice, pulling my fogged glasses off to wipe them on my sweater. But whoever had spoken was already gone, and the curtain behind a counter opposite was swaying back into place.
I was already eager to meet her, to pour her a cup of tea and tell her my own story, to help her realize hers.
I managed to get my now clear lenses back onto my nose. I took a slow look around.
I reached up to a top shelf to bring down a few teacups and sorted through the blends to find one that would open her eyes and ears even more as we talked.
I noticed the black curtain behind the counter twitch.
Cinder wove through my ankles, excited as well at the proximity of such warm, lovely magic.
And a moment later, a small gray cat with bright yellow eyes jumped up and landed softly on the case in front of me. I laid a hand on her soft body, and she purred without blinking. A shiver ran up my spine, and I laughed at myself. It was déjà vu I was feeling. But I knew I hadn't been here before. So then, what was this? I stroked the kitty between her eyes. And supposed it was being right where I was supposed to be at this particular moment. The curtain shifted again, and a woman with long black hair in a neat braid over one shoulder stepped through. She had a book with a green velvet cover in the crook of her elbow, and a soft smile on her face.
I remember still the feeling of awe and recognition as I peeled back the wrapping and held my grandmother's book in my hands. It was a family grimoire, handed down through the generations. It held entries from as far back as my 5 times great-grandmother, most of which was indecipherable to me, though I was still very glad it was there.
"Well," she said,
"shall we have a cup of tea and talk about magic?"
I smiled and nodded. Sweet dreams.